If you followed me through the different versions of my three podcasts, Mastering Midlife, Mastering Overwhelm, and now The Rising Leader, you know my next guest has been my most frequent guest, my most frequent collaborator. She's one of my closest friends in the entire world. She's a colleague, she's a mentor, like everything to me. Officially, Helen Appleby is a New York-based executive coach with a strong track record of leadership and commercial success. Prior to becoming a full-time coach, she was a VP of global business leader for GlaxoSmithKline, where she led a billion-dollar respiratory health business in consumer healthcare. She has worked in 6 different countries, led huge teams. She's the author of The Unwritten Rules of Women's Leadership, and she's here with us today. Helen, thank you for being here.
Yay. Hello.
Does everybody stumble over GlaxoSmithKline? Never do,
GSK.
never do podcasts late in the afternoon. Helen, I've been watching your career. You and I have worked closely together for a long time now. And I watched your career. I watched, you working with CEOs. I've watched you work with senior leaders, senior women, and focus on your women's leadership programs. But I also watched you take everything that you've learned and you've expanded it from just working with the CEO or doing your workshops to the senior leadership team. I watched you bring different kinds of workshops, personality test workshops, trust workshops, efficiency workshops to the organizations that you work with. And I'm curious about the evolution of your business and what you and how you work with the teams that you're working with now.
Yeah, it has been interesting, hasn't it? And I guess, COVID got thrown in there somewhat in the middle of that. So, which, definitely was a different period. But I guess if you kind of take that part out of it, I've definitely found the work has evolved. And in a way, that's really been client led. I find that, the best place to start with a team is with the leader. There's that expression, isn't there? So the leader goes, so the team goes. And so, starting work with the leader of a team and getting them self-aware, getting them grounded, getting them on a growth path really opens the door in many ways and gives permission for everybody on the team to be on that path too. And really that's how you unlock the power of the team. And so as what can often happen at the end of an assignment is a leader will say, that was great, and I don't want it to finish. Can you now coach my team? At which point I say, well, no, I can't because I don't have time. And also I coach you. So that would be weird. And then, as what works best then is to bring someone like you in and get the team coaches, their own coaches where appropriate. But then what I can do is I come back in and I coach the team as a whole team. So, historically, I've called that work team integration work. And it's really about the whole team, somewhat going on the journey that the CEO's already been on, learning their strengths and weaknesses, learning just key skills, like how to give feedback, how to have difficult conversations, how to build trust. And over time and over doing more and more of those workshops, it's really started to become, a curriculum and a way of thinking about healthy leadership. I'm kind of in this phase of the work that I'm doing. I'm really very focused on how do we get leaders and teams to be healthier? How do we make glass buildings healthier? And I don't mean anything to do with the air conditioning,
Right.
even more important than that. And so that's really the genesis behind the work that I'm doing now. And as you know, I've now started to write it down and develop more workshops and start to write a book on it.
Yeah, so I have the outline of the book here, but your work, was primarily focused for championing and supporting women in the workplace. And I know like half of your clients are male, half of your clients are female. Is this work more gender neutral?
It's what I describe as co-ed. And yes, and when you coach very senior leaders, unfortunately, the numbers will, look at the numbers. Many of them are men, and many of my favorite clients are men, and many of my favorite clients are very senior women too. So this work I describe as co-ed. But for me, my first book was a women's leadership book, and much of the work and much of the coursework that I do in the world still is for women. But I really think in many ways, this builds on that, because, if the focus is on having a healthy team, then, your skills of self-awareness and listening and building a healthy environment inevitably do lead to, higher levels of inclusion,
Sure.
and higher levels of diversity, because, as we know, diverse teams perform better. And so in a way, it feels like the work is a development from kind of developing the women to, working on the waters in which they swim as well.
Yeah, no, and like there's a section in the unwritten rules for women's leadership of women's leadership about how can you be a supporter, how can you make it a better place for women, and be an advocate. So this is, I think, definitely a continuation. I also give that book to men. Like this, there's so many sections in this book that it doesn't matter who you are, that you can learn. You can learn the concepts here and grow your leadership. I'm looking at the table of contents of the book. Does the book have a title or a working title? Like, what are you thinking about for this? What are you
It'll
going to
be
call it about?
interesting. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I haven't entirely settled on it, but in my mind, it's called the Leader's Health Check. It's that sense of, if I want to be a healthy leader and lead a healthy team, then what is it that I have to do? So it will be an assessment of how are we doing so far, against, my diagnosis of the important areas. And then, that enables us to track progress as we go along. How are we tracking as a team? And then to dive into, each of the individual sections and kind of important areas of, how do you set the vision and get people aligned? How do you, as a leader, show up in the healthiest way that you can? So that, how do you understand yourself? How do you do personality testing? How do you get feedback?
Mm.
How do you get clear on what your role is as the leader? As you and I know, many leaders, they got promoted because they could solve the problems themselves, and then they hire people who, should actually and often are better at solving the problems than they are, and then they have this sort of existential crisis of like, where do I add value now? So that's work that I do one-on-one, but it's great for everyone to get clear on, what's the work that only I can do,
Mm.
and how do I then build trust with my team? How do I have uncomfortable conversations with my team? And how do I develop the team? So, and then once you put all that together and look at how can you develop the organizational health, it really, it forms a complete picture of what it is you need to do to get to really high performance, but in a healthy way.
One of the things I've noticed in the organizations that I've seen you work in and that I've come into is the genius that you bring is you create this culture of growth from the top down, right? Well, you take a CEO who maybe not, hasn't really had that mindset, and you help open them and you give them experiences so that they are self-regulating, that they are learning to build trust, that they are learning, and it trickles down to the leadership team and then further in the organization. So you actually change the culture to make fertile ground for this kind of work.
Yeah, and that's why I think this work works best when I start with the leader. Because if she or he can go on that journey themselves first, then they can model it.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, people don't do what you say, they do what you do. And they don't get their permission from what you say is okay, they get their permission from what you do. And so a leader really candidly being able to say, thank you for the 360 feedback. I really understand now what's got me here and how, the three places that are going to get me to the next level builds an enormous amount of trust and an enormous amount of permission. So yeah, it's all about growth. is very much the mantra.
So I want to go through the sections of the book just a little bit here, because you start with strategic leadership and self-awareness and self-leadership. You even talk about, what is my job, like you just said, what is the things only I can do, building trust, having uncomfortable conversations, which you and I are both advocates for. The more and better you can be at having these difficult conversations, the better the trust in the team health development. How do you make sure that you're able to have these conversations, that you're all working in the same direction, that you have each other's backs? Organization, the entire organization health. Where are you finding the most pay dirt? Where are you finding the most bang for your buck when you're going through these different sections?
I like to think of them honestly as having a sort of a natural order.
Mm-hmm.
And it's almost like you have to start with, why are we here? What's the hill we want to climb? What's the plan? Getting that bigger vision and purpose, which is important to so many, and especially the younger generations that are coming through. But then getting alignment, when you have clear priorities first, and you can then cascade those into people's job objectives, then from that place people are clear. They know which part of the fish their hand is on. And you can hold them accountable, and there's real clarity within the organization as to why we're doing that. And then you layer on top of that the leaders' self-awareness, clarity on the roles, and then as we talked about, this trust that you build and the ability to have uncomfortable conversations. And then really it kind of cascades down. The work that the leader's done then starts to get done with the leadership team, and then the leadership team can then take that kind of clarity of what is there. Say they're the client's CFO, she leads the finance organization. The finance organization also needs its own, what's our vision for next year? What are our priorities? How do they ladder up to what we're doing overall? And then how is the CFO developing her team? And so, you get this kind of amplification because you can, have the whole organization on the same journey. So, is there one specific stage of this that you get the most return from? Probably, to be honest, the having uncomfortable conversations.
I would
The
say
ability, yeah, the ability to disagree in a healthy way and to give feedback to each other. Just, Pat Lencioni says that to succeed, teams need to be smart and they need to be healthy. And if you're going to choose one of those, we spend so much time and effort, don't we, trying to be smart, paying consultants to help us be smart, getting fancy degrees and, advanced degrees. And yet we spend so little time and effort often making sure that the team is healthy. So uncomfortable conversations and trust are really the bedrock, I think.
Yeah, I think we both noticed that teams often have their own personality type. So some
Yeah.
are more volatile. They do speak their mind, but they speak their mind in a very unproductive and very confrontational way, so
Yeah.
that there's no trust. Then there's others that avoid confrontation, avoid having those difficult conversations, and there's no trust. So it's no one size fits all. It's
Yeah.
just bringing everybody together, learning personality types so that you can
Mhm.
understand somebody else's world and how they receive information. There's so
Mhm.
much that goes into this.
Mm.
I've watched you just create miracles with leadership teams. Can you tell me a story, or tell me a situation where you were just surprised at some breakthrough that happened with a team?
Gosh, it's hard to pick one. Um, I remember workshop. I ran a workshop fairly recently where it's one of these. So teams often operate on a spectrum of either artificial harmony, if they don't want to have the difficult conversations, or destructive at the other end. And what we're trying to do is navigate them to the middle. But at the end of the workshop, where we kind of looked at people's personality types, one of the leaders said, "Oh my goodness, It was a him. He said, I didn't realize. He said, I thought they were an asshole. He said, now I realize it's just their personality type. And then he also said, I've been so scared to trust this team and so scared to really emotionally join it. And now I can finally see that actually they are well intentioned and that it's safe for me to actually be here and to lean in and to bring all my gifts.
Wow, that I just got goosebumps at that. I've never heard you actually say it that way. That the CEO, it feels like, him him or her against the team, like
Mhm.
to be able to actually integrate into the team, to build a team that you can trust. I could just feel the relaxation and the energy that would transfer with that. And that's just the tip of the iceberg of the brilliant work that you do.
And what happens when you build a team like that? I think it's really interesting for those of us that are further in our careers. If we look back and reflect on, where was I in? Where did I do my best work? Right? Where was I in a team that was really high performing? And those, those are the conditions where people can really unleash, bring it all, bring them their whole selves and do their best work. Um, so, it's rewarding for everybody and it's particularly rewarding for a leader. Some of these leaders, this is, the teams that they build and the work that they do, it's part of our legacy, isn't it? We really want to be able to look back and say, wow, I led well and
Mm.
enabled people to do their best work. Um, and what's interesting for me as well is even people who have been successful and very successful, often they haven't really been taught how to do this. Many times they do it on instinct. And so, I'm hoping with this work and having this kind of like, I've frequently, more than 3 times, I've had very successful leaders say to me, quietly, I really need your help. I'm not really sure I know what I'm doing to do this really well. Or maybe I could do it at this scale. And now we're so successful, it's at this scale. And I've never led at this scale. Or, I've never led a team that is so, whatever the team are, so X, you know. And and so to give us a framework for them to think, okay, are all the jigsaw pieces in place? Where are they? Where do we need to lean in? I hope will help not just the people who I work with directly, but that this will be an assessment and a workbook and tools that that anyone can use.
When do you think we'll all be able to see the book? Just throw a dart at it. I don't want to pin you down.
This is a 2024 project.
Okay,
And
2020.
as you know from the last book, I'm sure you will be there to drag it out of my hands at the end as I'm still trying to make it perfect.
Yeah, well, we'll say that's mutual, given that you've spent a couple of hours on Zoom making sure I finished my book that comes out in January. So this is a mutual thing. My last question is, what's the most satisfying thing about what you do? Like what fills you for what you do?
um, I guess it's it's impact. It's making people's lives better. I think what we do, it's in a work context, but there's a deeper part to what we do. When you can take a leader deep or take a team deep, even, you can shine light into the dark corners. You can help them step into the light. You can help them really understand and be their full selves. And so yes, as you've heard me say, sometimes I say I'm just a business coach, but yes, I am just a business coach, and we change lives, don't we? And certainly, my life was changed by having a coach. I would never be doing this if I hadn't had an amazing coach.
Yeah, for me, it's the same thing. We get hired for leadership skills. We get hired to build healthy teams, to create results. But what's ultimately satisfying is when someone calls you up and tells you, I'm not anxious anymore.
No,
I handled this situation without losing my shit. Like
no.
that, my relationship with my spouse is so much better. Those are the things that,
Yeah.
for me, that's what I live for. And I watch you do that all day, every day. So if someone needs more of Helen Appleby magic, where can they find you?
HelenApplebyCoaching.com or on LinkedIn, where we all are.
LinkedIn and Instagram, and we will put all of that in the show notes so that people can find you. And the unwritten rules of women's leadership is not just for women, although I give this to every woman who's in business that I know. I learn a lot from it. So thank you for being here, and thank you for being my friend.
Thank you.
I'm better for it, and so is everybody else. To everybody else, I just appreciate your time and your attention so much. Have a great rest of the day. I love you.